see start seeing some sort of outputs. Yes, I think we will just kind of segue straight into the open mic now. So we'll take a comment, and then anybody on anything related to the forum.
I think
I was hearing you.
I think you guys have to give yourself more credit, because if you look at the things that work in the Caribbean, okay, sports, exactly what you're doing is exactly what the IAAF does. Every country have their own representation of the IAAF, and they were in England. But look how successful Jamaica is. Look how successful Trinidad is, because locally you have the equivalent of the NIGF.
Right.
Which they don't do the running.
Right.
When we need training, we go to the IAAF representation here. If you follow models that work in the Caribbean, you don't have to think of yourself as being different. I like the idea of the Caribbean Internet Development Foundation. You see what I'm saying? Because it's an action word. So to the extent that you're developing something, follow a model that works. You are an international body. Even if we say Caribbean, yes, but we're all members of the United Nations. We're international. We just happen to be culturally, sharing the same thing. But the CIGF and the NIGF, right? It's beautiful. If you implement it based on what works, then you don't have to, you're thinking too much.
Yeah.
There's too much thinking. Just implement. Just develop. That word called development. Trial and error. You're not going to get it right the first time. But because you are a governing body, okay, you're frequency agile. You can change. It's agile development. Don't try to figure everything out. With agile development, if something is wrong, you change it.
Yeah.
Okay? In that way, we'll get better based on experience, not on knowledge.
Right.
We're using too much knowledge. We have to use experience.
Experience as well.
Okay.
All right. Okay, we are open to general comments on anything, any topic. I remember during our earlier session on GDPR, there was a hand up that we weren't able to get to. We could take that now. Any other topic? You have one here.
Anissa Butkun from Telecoms Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. I actually just wanted to commend the CTU on the two, especially for the two multi-stakeholder panel discussions, one from yesterday and today. It was very informative, and I appreciated the discussions coming from that. Particularly, I know for today, with regards to the data protection, and I appreciate the challenges that the SG would have preferred in her presentation just now, because I actually had a comment that would have come out from the session this morning. Being an attorney myself, I do know the challenges that we have when we have to draft legislation or understand the technical issues that come before us, because we try, and coming from the regulator, you'd obviously have some knowledge as it relates to a particular issue. However, having to put that down in a prescriptive form or legislation is somewhat difficult. So we do try to engage with our technical counterparts to pull that knowledge from them to get it right. More so than not, it is difficult. However, it is not from lack of trying. And within the Caribbean region, and I will use Trinidad and Tobago as an example, we do have a shortcoming as it relates to legislative drafting, because it is a very, very difficult field. Not a lot of persons gravitate towards it. And it is highly technical, because you have to try to understand, say, and I'm going to use this again as an example, within the CPC's department, in the Office of the Attorney General, they wouldn't understand something ICT-based because it's something so foreign to them. And I mean, they understand the Facebook, they understand the Google, that's something part of their daily life. But the background to it, they lean to us as the experts to say, okay, well, this is what you need for a merger or acquisition. This is what you need when it comes to another component, a technical standard, licensing. But they wouldn't understand it. So there are shortcomings within various aspects as it relates to legislative drafting, attorneys having to grapple with these issues. So I just wanted to bring that perspective from my personal perspective, being an attorney here, and having to try to understand that. Secondly, as she did raise it, with regards to the government buying into the issues, basically, you would have many meetings of minds in regional meetings, international meetings, where technical persons go and represent their countries. And you would have those persons sitting in different tables, different meetings, and they would understand it. But when you have to bring it back and try to explain that, and then that takes time, and it takes a will and a buy-in from those at the macro level to say, hey, this is really important. Because at the end of the day, there must be a thrust to understand that ICT is the basis now for everything. I think somebody mentioned that it's not just one sector. Oh, actually, it was Gabrielle from Google. It's not just one sector. It's every sector that's affected by ICT, because that's the foundation in which the evolution of our global investment operations, money being monetization of any industry. That's the premise on which it's built. So we have to have that real buy-in in terms of that regional cooperation and collaboration at the macro level first. And thereafter, once you have that, these are the persons who actually make the decisions, give you the money, give you the buy-in. And then once that marries with the technical persons having that knowledge, it will be seamless. But if you have us learning and building our capacity and the macro level with the government not buying into it, it's going to be delays, which we see with regards to legislation not being amended, regulations not being updated or implemented. We see it with the model laws not being customized and ratified into domestic legislation. So I think holistically, it's a approach that we have to look all around. It's culturally, it's macro level, it's the buy-in from the governments, it's the general need for us to say this is important, this is what we need. And if we say that it's important, we will begin developing our sector, we'll become true partners, and then persons would want to invest, as Mr. Mr. Duncan was saying, that you would get investment funds, you'd get persons on a global stage saying, hey, the Caribbean is a viable option. Let's come in, let's see what they have. Because we all know, again, we are bright people. We are very, very knowledgeable, and we have that capacity. So we do have something to offer, not in numbers, because we have a little needle in a haystack, but we do have something that is viable and lucrative for the global sector. So that's just my contribution. So thanks once again.
Yes. One behind you. Oh, do it. Oh.
Yeah, just one of the things that was mentioned was two comments. One was demand, and we hear the thing about will. I have sat during years and seen there are many legislations, laws passed, but never executed. Somehow we do all the nice things you all say, multi-stakeholder, this, that, civil society, and it gets stuck somewhere, buried. And one of the things is that governments change every 5 years in the Caribbean. And I don't think anybody really addressed the elephant in the room. It depends on who the government is, because it could be with a different agenda. Some may be ICT focused and some not, right? And it gets shelved. But so while we say we're gonna go on a macro level, I will beg to differ. We need to push from the consumer level, because if we don't push from the consumer level, it's not going to go anywhere. People have seen things, all the bright minds and all the efforts, and it was really heartened to see Carlton's presentation, where you had people tabling laws that were passed. They changed things, and it all depends. We have to stop talking. We have all these brilliant pieces of legislation. We have all these brilliant plans. We have all these people coming together, and we will have forums for the next 15 years, and we're going nowhere. We are bent on great intentions, but not execution. And my thing is, someone, somewhere, it takes with one. And we have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. One of the things I loved about the things is that we're making progress. But we have to have that will. And as Caribbean people, somehow, I don't know who told us that we don't have the will, because we do it for other sectors. We have to create the demand, because the demand starts with us because we like the American thing. We like everything. Let's say it. And I'm saying it. I'm sorry if you all don't want to talk to me, but I'm saying it. We like it. It starts with us. Thank you.
Gregor?
Okay. In the matter of data protection legislation, we haven't had much discussion or so on our Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ. But why was that? Because if we want to get into that, we have to look at the CCJ with some seriousness and cooperation and work to go with it. And in the other one of legislation, when we look at our storage areas and capacities and so all over the place, what happens when a government with a Trump leader or president comes along and say, look, we don't like what you're doing, and you can't get your hands, just like what they've done to our banking system. They might very well want to do that with our storage system. So I think that is something that we need to look at very, very seriously. Thank you.
Is it drying up? Are we there? Okay. All right. All right. Not seeing any. I think.
One.
Oh, okay. Yes, I agree.
Is it possible that when we are preparing for these regional conferences, first look into having some level of webinars with the registered attendees and participants leading up, like 2 to 3 weeks before, where, okay, we come to discuss data protection, etc. We have a webinar on that. So new people, existing persons who would have gotten some updated information can now discuss it in the webinar. So when we come to a forum like this, you're coming because people in the room who you know at some point before, well, we're Caribbean people, we already said the day before. But apart from those people, right? Apart from those people, we have webinars, we have pre-conference discussions. So when you come, it's an informed room on all sides, because coming into the room, everybody knows as much as the silo knows. We could break that by having that discussion as one. 2, I've heard about the different conferences internationally outside the region for a number of years. And I've followed the IGF, CTU from time to time. I'll come to events. And I realized that even though persons may go outside, I mean, yes, we're talking about the vision, and we had a debate. Yes, we have leadership, we have our place at the table, etc. But I'm saying, what does not happen is when that information or that experience is gotten outside the region, when the person comes back, we don't really get a report of what happened there. What did you present? Who was the person in the room who was giving you trouble? Whose agenda was going against the Caribbean agenda? And what was your position and what did you say to defend it? What it does, I am very keen on continuity, because I'm sure in this room, I know the 1 2 people who started with CTU and today they're nowhere wrong. They lose interest because there's a saying that the last step before death is irrelevance. And to hedge against that, we need to put systems in place, hard and harsh systems in place to ensure one, a knowledge base is built. Two, that knowledge is transferred. And three, it's continue being updated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Actually, we do need to work more on our intersessional type activities. It's really been I guess a bit of the resource challenge at CTU that it hasn't gone as well maybe as it has in the past. But sorry? I want to respond to that. You want to respond to that?
A couple of three things. First of all, a lot of this work this year doing is volunteer based. So you have to be prepared to put in time and effort and your own money, quite frankly, into this. And that is where the rubber hits the road. As a serial volunteer, and there are a couple of us in this room, we have tried desperately to get other people involved in the conversation. Jacqueline is sitting here in front of me. Where's Dev? He's over there. Niran is over there. There's a small group of us who've worked since the early 2000s, trying to build capacity in getting people involved in these kinds of issues. We have joined the forum. We have done the online webinars. When we have spent our own money sometimes to get to places. We have put out things on the wire. We document and we put it into place. We have Civic. We try to put what we do on Civic. We have WhatsApp groups that everybody can join, and we look for people to join it. The problem that we have is that it takes a lot of time and effort. And if you're not a policy wonk, like probably some of us, you tend to go away. They tend to go away. So you constantly have to be recruiting new people. And when you have to recruit people, you lose the institutional memory. And it is the biggest problem we face. CTU tried to do webinars, intersessional webinars, many years ago. You'd have 2 or 3 people on the platform. Eh? And the same 2 or 3 people. And that's the other problem, the same 2 or 3 people. So we've been through this along. I will tell you something else. In everything that I've done, I've tried to look for people who can support me, who I can pass on to. So we are constantly recruiting. We recruit a whole slew of people. If you look and see my name as a referee to people from all over the Caribbean going to all of these things, just do a search and you see how many times my name comes as a referee. Of those people that have gone and participated 1 or 2 times, probably how much we get, Jacqueline? 2? Maybe 2, if we're lucky. If we're lucky. So that's a real problem. The real problem is these issues are not for the faint of heart. They're just not. It requires a lot of thinking, a lot of reading, a lot of interaction, a lot of talking with each other, and it takes time and effort and yes, money. And it's some of us just can't be in it for the long haul. And that's a real problem that we have.
Talia?
Hi. So I wanted to address an issue which I think would sort of build up on what you were just talking about there, which is basically...
I don't know if we got your name.
Oh, my name is Sean Melville.
Sean?
Melville, yeah. Sean Melville.
Melville.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that... Oh, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm a social entrepreneur, and I am also involved in a lot of technology-based projects. So my question really has to do with how can you get people to care? Because I think that's the fundamental problem that you have. If people don't care in terms of they don't understand the conversations that are going on, or they think that it's irrelevant to their life, then you will not make any progress. You could establish institutions at the highest level, but you will not get buy-in. And you could talk to governments and ask them to fund, but if it's not in their interests, you're not going to get support. So my question to you is really, how would you change your way of thinking in terms of the model or structure that you're going to organize yourself, so that people care about the actual outcome or the implementation of the actual initiatives and don't see it as being irrelevant or unproductive, which I think is probably one of the main issues that we have in getting support.
That sounds like a topic for a forum.
Right.
Let's hear from Talia first.
Okay. All right. I like the idea of the Caribbean Internet Development Foundation. I think, however, that we should not be trying to get governments to buy in specifically. Governments are a key stakeholder, of course, right? And they can provide funding. But I think you want to look at who stands to benefit the most by implementing it and talk to those people, right? Because if whether it's the Facebooks or the Googles or the Google that actually get access to a market that is open to their products being implemented here without the bureaucracies of the financial systems or the legislations that prevent trade, then we will actually be able to get funding coming from them, which would then open up the markets essentially. The other aspect which I look at, which is the funding for the implementation of the projects. You have a lot of entrepreneurs. Why not target them and establish the projects from that basis? Because you have the implementation by them, and you also have funding coming from the international agencies. So all you have to do is just develop the projects, find the entrepreneurs who are willing to actually implement the project, and go to the international agencies to get the funding for the project. And you would solve your problems, at least most of them.
Okay, first, the last one first. That is actually the model. That is what people do. We go to the IGF, we meet other people, we develop partnerships, we talk to people like Google or Facebook or whatever, and we say, okay, the important thing is that it's bottom up. So I am, for example, Lance has these people in the Rupununi in Guyana, and they are interested in getting some internet access. So they talk to Lance. Lance comes and talks to some of the people he knows. We get some funding. ISOC is doing a lot of projects with that. LACNIC is doing some projects with that. You get local people who are able to do that, and they found the community network, and they have internet. That's how the projects have been working. What happens, to go back to the first one, is that it's difficult to say. There are people who are particularly suited. I have to say that's a fact. There are people who are particularly suited to doing a particular kind of work. We do a lot of recruiting. We find people, they're not particularly suited to doing this particular work. However, we find that they fall in other parts. So they form an NGO, and they do things like community networking or training and so on. So they do stay in the space, and they have interest in certain things. But out of every 40 or 50, we'll find 2 or 3 who have these specific factors that are necessary to sit down 10, 15, 20 hours a week reading about the details of the registrar agreement, and then spending another 6 hours a week on a teleconference and doing that year in, year out. that is, we would love more people to be interested in that, but it is a very specific kind of work. But that doesn't mean that there isn't other work that can be done, you know? And there's a lot of space. ISOC is doing a lot of things like that. ISOC Trinidad and Tobago has 157 members, and they are working, and they work on projects. The Trinidad and Tobago Computer Society, I'm talking about the ones I know, have another, they have 150 members, and they do projects. They go out and we do training for certain people, and there's a lot of things that happen out of the discussions. It's just that people have this idea that where you have the discussion must be the place that things are implemented. And that is not what happens. You have the discussion, people meet, they say, oh, we have a mutual interest. A partnership is formed, they go off and they do something. What could and should happen is that the IGFs and these spaces where the discussion happens should follow the kinds of partnerships and the kinds of actions that come out of the discussions, even though we don't actually do them here. They come out of what happens here, but they're not traced back to the conversations that happen here. Do you see what I mean? So it looks as if it's a talk shop and, oh, well, nothing really happened at the meeting. But what happened at the meeting is that this one, that one, and the next one got together. Somebody had a connection to a grant. They got the grant. They made a project. They went out. They did something. 200 or 1,000 people got internet access in the middle of the Amazon. But that doesn't come back to, oh, I had this discussion over lunch at the Caribbean IGF. And that sort of connection is what you need to get in order to say this has value. And we've not been measuring it, but anecdotally, I know over 15 years, this does have that sort of value.
Talia?
Okay, so I have a number of points here just based on all the other comments and then my own. First one is to kind of just parallel what Agri spoke to at his first comment with regard to more avenues
intersectional
for not really intersectional, but more so public awareness and content towards public participation and public awareness of these issues that will affect the layman on the road, the young entrepreneurs coming up. I think one of the biggest ways to influence government is to raise public awareness on issues, because we all know how governments work with regard to their perception of what their citizens want and in relation to votes. Mr. Duncan mentioned SDGs more than once. So I am also a serial volunteer, and I like that term. And I wear a number of hats in social and environmental and now technology. I'd like to thank Niran for influencing me to come and join this this other side of CSOs. And it's because I see myself adding value in this way that we could use the SDGs to develop mechanisms for implementation and projects. With that being said, looking at education and advocacy as the ways that you couch your project proposals is truly a mechanism that the UN is looking forward to, from technical arenas such as this, but more so towards, I forgot his name. With regard to advocacy and education is all well and good, but we need to influence change in behavior, and that will lead to people actually caring, and those human behavior issues that we know in the Caribbean, we need to start looking at more critically if we want to unite the Caribbean effectively. Another opinion I have with regard to generational gaps occurring and the challenge for succession planning, which is happening all over. I remember when I was doing my energy MBA, it was even a big discussion within the oil and gas sector and the loss of just institutional knowledge from that sector. And they were looking at that since 20 years ago. So succession planning is a critical area that I think everybody in this space needs to look at and strategically plan towards, and not just talk about it, but have it as a objective or aim. I myself, I don't know if you all would be aware of the vast environmental movements happening, being led by youths as young as 15. There's a young girl in Sweden who is leading a great movement. And one thing that we have noticed in the environmental community is with the age of technology and disruptive technologies and social media, the movement itself has gained much more respect and global attention because of our influence on young people. And if it is, we could critically go through lessons learned from a CTU level over the last 15 years. I think it's a good exercise all organizations should go through, where you do lessons learned, involve stakeholders, and plan towards improving, but also learning from the good and the bad that happened in the past. And the last thing I want to say is there's a book called Collapse by Jared Diamond, and I was exposed to this book many years ago, and he speaks about the collapse of nations from an entomological point of view. And when the book starts off, it skews itself to people thinking it's about the environment, but it's not. He looks at societies with their engagement and adaptation of technology, be it what we would consider old technology or disruptive technologies. And ICT and this type of age of information that's happening right now, I think it's very critical that we identify linkages in order to foster correct partnership and collaboration, which is also difficult, towards moving the Caribbean ICT space forward. So identifying of critical partnerships are very important and linking it with regard to technology and innovation and advancement.
Thank you.
I have to apologize for being positive about this. Because what is happening here, you guys are romanticizing the problem. You don't have a problem. Houston, we don't have a problem. Because the thing about it is, you are the Caribbean. We have placed Carnival in 288 cities across the globe. Trinidad, look at reggae. We have to follow models that work. And I'll tell you something. I have to commend you guys for what you have done. Because I didn't come to Trinidad to come to this conference. I came for something else. And my guy invited me. And I'm glad I came. Because I go to many developing countries and I participate in this. It's the same thing. The developing countries are trained to complain. All right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all by design. Post-colonial consumer syndrome. What happens is that you have the answers. And the answers come from being implementation partners. Okay? There's something on Wall Street called NGS. Need, greed, and speed. Okay? The TTMA and all these companies here in Trinidad need you to sell products throughout the Caribbean. So you become the implementation partner. Because every time we discuss policies and practices and we don't practice, it's just a policy. The thing about it is that Trinidad have an embarrassment of intellectual geniuses. So does Jamaica. So does all the Caribbean countries. But we speak too much about the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The problem, we have leaders. I would trust Bernadette Lewis, okay,
Mm-hmm.
to be the leader and provide all the support she needs. Don't use the word funded, because the funding people don't like that word.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use the word sponsorship, because the sponsors don't like that word. They want to be revenue partners. They want to make money with you, because of you, by you, who, what, when, where, why, how, and then how much. The thing about it is, if you keep using this cost model, you're going to be stuck. We're going to come back here 15 years from now, we'll be speaking about the same thing. But the minute you start generating revenue with sports, who needs telecom, with tourism, who needs telecom, with trade and investment, who needs telecom, you become the fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Music, very good. Creativity, right? Every one of these. The reason why we don't use the word ICT again, because it makes it a subject. We use IT. And the reason why we use IT, because IT means it is transparent. No longer exists. I came from IBM in Trinidad. I learned everything here, way back in the early 80s. And everything I learned in Trinidad, I've used all around the world. The thing is, we are geniuses. If you don't accept that, you'll be arguing every day about something you already solved.
Something that you can solve yourself.
Exactly. We have to celebrate. Why aren't we celebrating what we have achieved? All right? That's the spirit of the Caribbean people. We celebrate Carnival. Brian Lara was 50 years yesterday. Big celebration. You have models that which you can use. If you become an implementation partner, you are indispensable. That's the key. You help people sell what they want to sell, and they'll give you all the money you need. Just don't ask for funding. That's a bad word. No funding. It's SRI, social responsible investment. An investor expects a return on his investment. You see what I'm saying? There's a time to market, there's a cost of ownership, and there's a return on investment. Your lingua franca has to change. The lingua franca you're using is one of begging. Do not beg. You have an overwhelming unfair advantage over everybody else. You are the carriers of information. Without you, nothing happens. You see what I'm saying? But the more you make yourself seen as people who don't know what they're doing, the real money goes out. We're speaking to each other on WhatsApp. We have to send a message to Silicon Valley. It goes to North Carolina in the data warehouse, comes down to Miami, goes the undersea cable to talk to my sister right here. Why don't we have our own communication system, like what telco used to do? If I need a call from Curepe to Chaguanas, the call completes right here. No, we have to go to the US to come back here. And we think we're making progress. Yes. All right, it stays right here. But the thing about it is, do you own it? At the end of the day, we built software in Trinidad to run Royal Bank, Scotiabank. There was a bank called NBC or NCB.
NCB.
Right. I was involved in all of that. So I come back here, it's like Rip Van Winkle waking up and realizing, whoa, what's going on here? With this room of geniuses. We have to celebrate each other. Where's the after party? We should have an after party every night. What's this? This is not us. This is not the Caribbean. We have adopted the failures of others. That's what we have done. This discussion should not be taking place because if you have a leader who has been there for 15 years, if you guys have been there doing, I don't like the word volunteer, by the way. There's so much money to be made with what you do. It's called advice and consultation. The group called CTU is the #1 advice and consultant agency in the Caribbean for telecom. The thing is, you need implementation partners. What you lack is not volunteers. The minute you say, hey, there's money, you're gonna get all the volunteers. You see what I'm saying? At the end of the day, we have to be Caribbean people. We have to build software that reflects us. We are all excited about Facebook, it's not ours. We're all excited about Google, it's not ours. We're using Google to find Curepe.
Everything.
Right? All we have to do is bring a map of Trinidad and point to Curepe. So we're not being practical. I would like to support all of you guys of what you want to do, because part of what happens when you travel around the world, you develop relationship equity with people who have the same problem you have. I can bring 10 countries right now. West Africa is 360 million people. They have ECOWAS, we have CARICOM. CTU is based on CARICOM. They have something that's based on ECOWAS. They are your partners. They're not here. I don't see them here.
No.
You can't have these meetings unless you bring people who have solved the problem before, based on UN SDG goal number 17. That's why Kofi Annan created that goal under UN MDGs. It was goal number 8. And you never used it. So that's all I got to say. Stop complaining because you have succeeded already.
Yes.
Celebrate your success and go to the next level of success.
Again.
It's very hard to talk after a Duncan. But I happen to be born and grew up in a Central American country that speaks English. Patois, Tushao, and a few other languages that are dying.
Oh, excuse me. Let me just say, I think I need to close the line after I agree. Our lunch is soaring for almost an hour there. So, right? So please go ahead. And I'll be as brief as you can.
Right. So I'm not going to be that guy to stop you from lunch.
Yes.
So given that I have never, I don't know, I'm probably ignorant to a lot of the things that have gone on before and what it really takes. So excuse me for my ignorance, but I have not seen the need or the involvement of indigenous communities, whether it be in Belize, I'm from Guyana, so I don't want to mention Guyana first. Guyana and other, Suriname, wow, yes. Being engaged in the consultation.
Thank you.
In consultations. Here's why. Because there is an issue now where the indigenous community in Guyana is asking that a lot of the stuff that are being brought to them by partners have not considered the language barrier. So it's primarily English or French or Spanish that didn't do the groundwork on getting, let's say, somebody who speaks Tusha or come from a particular tribe to translate the information or train them, build that person's capacity, and let that person on the ground who understands the culture and the climate and the environment implement the solution. So that's the only thing that I think I would suggest, that we look at the different indigenous groups and the and persons who speak outside of the French, Spanish, and English, and reach out to them in the 3 or 4 countries that have different populations and see how we can truly involve them in a truly Caribbean discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, with that, I'd want to bring the discussion to a close. I would like to thank everyone, I think, for our 2 days of very, very engaged participation. And I promise you a lunch next door, but the admission fee is your evaluation form, those which were distributed on the desks not too long ago. So please give us your feedback, because we always want to know and improve in terms of the fora that we hold. Rest assured that we will take all the information that was fed back, especially related to the policy framework, and incorporate it and take it forward. We'll seek to issue our CIGF report as promptly as possible. It's always a challenge because we have other stuff going on. But I have to say I'm very happy with the engaged participation that we've had. People have stayed even though the work got long and so on. I don't know if Yeshu wants to say anything. No? Okay, right. So folks, I would have to say thank you for making the 15th CIGF as successful as it has been. We look forward to your cooperation and correspondence over the next year until we meet again, maybe in about a year's time for the 16th forum. So thank you very much. Please submit your evaluation forms and have lunch.